Hello, guys. Okay, so we're trying to put the boys to bed, so we'll see what happens in terms of that. Hopefully, everything goes good. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to go over our Unit 1 FRQ assignment from AP Central. Okay, so from AP Classroom. So that's the first thing to let you guys know that we're going to do. Okay, so let me share my screen with you. And let me share my screen with you. And we're going to go ahead. There we go. Okay, guys. So let's take a look at this. So you should see this PowerPoint in Google Classroom, okay? You should see this PowerPoint in Google Classroom. And what's going to happen is you will see, along with this PowerPoint, what I want you guys to do is I want you to make sure that you have available to yourself not only this video, but you're going to have the scoring guide from AP Classroom, and then you're also going to have the scoring sheet that you guys are going to be responsible for filling out utilizing the answers that you provided on AP Classroom when we had this assignment, okay? So that's the way that this is going to work. So before we get started, make sure that you take notes, all right? Make sure that you take notes. And one of the things that we've talked about is, okay, my hair is like super crazy and weird, but oh well. All right, so one of the things that we talked about is you need to make sure that you are keenly aware of what College Board is asking from you. All right. Whenever they grade these FRQs, they're very, very specific in terms of what they want. And you're going to see that when you look at the scoring guidelines. All right. So you need to make sure that you are paying attention to exactly what the College Board is asking for. When you guys look at your actual AP answers, what I want you to do is I want you to be mean to yourself, all right? Be super mean when you're looking over your own answers. Don't give yourself the benefit of the doubt. Don't automatically assume, well, it's cool, it's not a big deal because blah, 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 blah. No, it is a big deal. All right, so you've got to make sure that you're being really mean to yourself, because the reality is that your entire AP score this year is going to come down to your FRQs. Okay, so moving on. All right, so you're going to see, we're jumping straight in. You've got FRQ number 1. So you're going to have 20 minutes, blah, blah, blah. We already know that that's not the thing this year. This year, you're going to have 45 minutes and you're going to have 2 FRQs. We also know that those 2 FRQs are going to both have stimulus, okay? You're going to have 1 stimulus on 1 FRQ, and then you're going to have 2 stimuli on the second one. Okay, so one of the things that the instructions for the actual FRQs say is they say you need to make sure that you plan and you outline your answer, which is exactly what I've been telling you, right? Okay, so let's take a look at this one. This one has 2 parts, and you've got part A and part B. All right, so let's look at it. Part A and part B. Do you see a stimulus? First things first. Oh my God, Miss Omeda, no, there's no stimulus at all. You're right. There's no stimulus at all. Okay, so there is no stimulus. So is this an example of the type of FRQ that you guys will see on your actual AP exam this year? It's not. All right, it's not. But nevertheless, we're still going to continue with this because it does give us a good example of the type of writing that we need to do for our AP exam as a whole. Okay, so letter A. Letter A says identify and explain one way that tourism has diminished regional landscape distinctiveness. Okay, so that's letter A. Do we see important verbs here? Very much so. All right, so our verbs for letter A easily would be identify and explain. Okay, are these 2 of the 3 verbs that we may see on our AP exam this year? Well, I know for a fact explain is, right? Okay, remember, initially we had 5 FRQ verbs that we had to know, that we had to be aware of. Now, the College Board has let us know that we're only going to be utilizing 3 of those verbs. Okay, and explain is totally on there. It's one of the biggies. So, identify and explain. You've got those verbs for letter A. Letter B, identify and explain as well. There we go again. All right, so letter B, identify and explain. One way, tourism has enhanced regional landscape distinctiveness. Okay, so with any FRQ, you've got to make sure you, number one, look at your stimulus. Okay, is there a stimulus? If there is, how am I going to analyze that? That's the first thing. Second thing, your verbs. What do they want me to do? All right, because that's a biggie. And then your vocabulary. A lot of times you're not going to be able to give them what they want unless you know what the heck they're talking about, right? Remember the whole like Jello versus chocolate cake thing? Exact same thing. All right, so vocabulary. Some of the big things for letter A. So letter A, your vocabulary would be diminished, because we got to know what the heck does diminished mean. I mean, it's italicized and everything, right? Diminished. And then we've got regional landscape. And then you have distinctiveness. Those are all things that you really, really need to know what they mean to be able to give the College Board what they want. All right, so that's in just letter A. Okay, letter B also has the exact same one, so regional landscape and distinctiveness, but in addition to that, instead of diminished, it has enhanced. Okay, and I know that some of you guys are probably looking at this like, well, duh, I know what diminished means, or I know what enhanced means, but maybe you don't. Or maybe you have a misconception of what it means, and that's why we've got to be really careful. All right, so we got to know what they want. We've already done our little outline. Easy peasy. Moving on. So part A, ask yourself, what the heck do they want, right? So part A, remember, you've got identify and explain one way that tourism has diminished the regional landscape distinctiveness. Okay, so one of the big, when we say diminished, we're talking about how it's lessened, okay? How it's lessened, how it has not, basically how it's lessened. I'm trying to find another synonym and my mind is going blank because it's like 11 at night. Okay, so how has tourism, all right, well, what the heck is tourism? Okay, it's when people go and like visit, right, and they spend money and they look at the culture of an area. So it's when you visit, travel. All right, so tourism has diminished or lessened regional landscape distinctiveness. Okay, what does it mean if something is distinct? It's unique, just like you. Okay, it's uniqueness. All right, so it's uniqueness. So regional landscape uniqueness or distinctiveness, regional landscape is going to be the specific area that you're looking at. Okay, and I know that it's like, well, I kind of get it, but I don't really get it. Here's a perfect example. The valley. Okay, the Rio Grande Valley, super distinctive, super unique. You're going to notice there's a lot of taquerias. There's places where you can visit like a curandero, right? Herberias. There's a lot of Hispanic influence that we see here in the valley. Botanas. You don't see botanas anywhere else. You don't even see them McAllen's a part of the valley, but you don't even see them in like San Antonio. San Antonio, you got this weird like super nachos thing, okay? You don't see that everywhere. That's a regional landscape distinctive feature. It's something that is unique to this area, okay? You're not going to find it elsewhere, all right? So how has tourism or traveling diminished or lessened that in particular areas? So your big focuses are going to be on the place itself or the idea of placelessness. If you don't remember what placelessness is, you gotta look it up, but I'm gonna tell you anyways. So placelessness is basically where everything looks the same. It could be anywhere USA. So if you're driving down, like we're in Edinburgh, if you're driving down University and you see Walmart, Wendy's, Jack in the Box, McDonald's, all right, all of those things, what is in common with Walmart, Wendy's, Jack in the Box, McDonald's? They're everywhere. They could be anywhere. If you see those things grouped up together, you could be in Alabama, you could be in Wisconsin, you could be in another country, right? Because those places are everywhere. So that's a sense of placelessness. So placelessness is where an area lacks distinctiveness. Okay, or uniqueness. That's placelessness, not place, obviously. Okay, that's the whole idea, excuse me, of placelessness. Landscape and distinctiveness. So we've talked about that. Your regional landscape is going to be that specific area, and distinctiveness is how unique it is. And then how tourism affects this distinctiveness. So what do you see in a landscape that is unique to that particular area? All right. This part of your FRQ is worth 3 points. All right. So identify and explain one way that tourism has diminished regional landscape distinctiveness. All right. Moving on. You're going to identify and explain. Okay. So this is what they're looking for. You got 1 point if you identified, because identifying doesn't take as much work as explaining. All right. So if you identified any of the following things, so if you identified that there was a standardization or a homogenization, again, these two things go with placelessness. Okay. They go with the idea that everything is the same. Everything the same. All right. So standardization. So if you just identified that there is a feeling of placelessness or standardization or homogenization or uniformity, sameness, all right? Any of these things, you got 1 point. Okay? That's just for that first portion of letter A. So you needed to identify, that's 1. You also needed to explain. Okay, so identify we did, now you need to explain. All right, so now to explain that, you would go into more depth as to why everything is the same. Because all you see are the same hotels or fast food chains, like what we talked about with McDonald's, Wendy's, Jack in the Box, Walmart, right? Okay, hotels, fast food chains, infrastructure, like, oh, there's a lot of airports, there's roads everywhere, resorts, theme parks, environmental degradation, okay? So where you have litter, pollution, impacts on wildlife. If you extend and you give examples like what we gave for McDonald's, Jack in the Box, Walmart, that would be the 2-pointer. Extended explanation with appropriate examples. All right. If you just say there's a lot of fast food everywhere, that's not going to be specific enough. That's not enough of explaining. Okay. Think about if you get in trouble and you're out past curfew, your mom's got you cornered and she says, explain yourself. I was with Diego. That's so not enough, right? Not enough. Not enough at all. You're going to have to get into, well, I was with Diego. He was having car trouble. And then he called his mom. And then his mom told us that we should call his Uncle Alex because his Uncle Alex is the only one that knows how to fix the car. And blah, 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 and this is why I'm late, right? Okay. That's where you need to get into that explaining. Because you know, mom is not going to be okay with you just saying, I don't know, it was with Diego. It's not going to work. Sorry, Diego. Okay. So keep that in mind. All right. So you've got 1 point for that identification and then up to 2 points for the explain, depending on how good your explanation was. All right. Common errors. the misinterpretation of the term diminishing. Okay, remember, diminishing is to lessen. Okay, a lot of people didn't know that that was what diminishing meant. They may have thought that it was something bad or that it was just not good or something was wrong. It's not a value judgment, it's simply lessening of something. The other common error that was found is that a lot of times people only saw tourism as economic. Okay, tourism isn't just economic. Yeah, you make money off of it, but it also affects the landscape, specifically its distinctiveness. All right, specifically how unique it is. Because as unique as the valley is, not everybody knows Spanish, right? So you're going to have some items that are going to feed into people's common traits or common likes universally, which is not distinct. Okay? So keep that in mind. All right, part B. Again, what's this question asking? Again, you have to identify and explain. The same focuses, guys, because it's the same thing. The only biggie that's different is you need to know what the heck enhanced is. So enhances or makes it more prevalent or more more in your face, okay? So it enhances something. All right, again, this part is 3 points as well. So to enhance the regional distinctiveness, you could talk about place preservation. All right, Quinta Mazatlan, that's a good example. The birding centers, right? So place preservation, place uniqueness, things that you only have in that one area. Botanas, all right? And place marketing. Whenever you see those commercials where they say, oh, we can do this in Utah because this is the only place where you have the Arches National Park or whatever, right? That's place marketing, where they are hitting on what is unique to that place and why you should go to that place. All right, so that's enhancing the distinctiveness. That was 1 point. Then again, you could get up to 2 points for an extended explanation with appropriate examples. So again, where we get into those specifics. So the promotion of exotic scenery, wildlife, beaches, ecotourism, Quinta Mazatlan, the birding center, right? Conservation of natural resources, birds. Maintaining cultural landscape, the preservation of historic buildings or sites. I am such a history nerd. When I lived in Florida, I was so excited to go to St. Augustine because it is the oldest settlement in the entire United States. And it has this huge Spanish fort that was established before the US was even the US. So it's really cool. It was the first place that I wanted to go. That's a good example of enhancing the regional distinctiveness and that preservation of historic buildings or sites, because you could go around and they had like ghost tours and stuff like that. Things like that. That's the preservation of historic buildings or sites. Sustaining indigenous lifestyles. All right. So cultures and art. When you see things like a posada, right? Because that's cultural. So you see posadas, you see in Chinatown, maybe you see the celebration of Chinese New Year, right? Those are things that are unique to an area. And again, make sure that you give examples because that's explain is asking you to talk about something with examples. Okay? All right. First one, done. Again, those misinterpretations of enhanced and diminished, and then the idea that tourism is only economic, which it totally isn't. Believe me. We've been watching a lot of Mark Weems. If you don't know who he is, you should know who he is. He's an amazing food blogger. Yeah, culture, food, hello. All right. So you've got to realize tourism is more than just the economic aspect. So what you're going to need to do is you're going to have to say, all right, well, how many points did I earn? Did I earn 0 points on letter A? 1, 2? Did I get the big 3? Right? Be mean to yourself. Take a look at what you did. Okay? Be aware. All right, for FRQ. So FRQ number 2. FRQ number 2 out of 3. We're pretty good. FRQ 2 out of 3. You've got dairy farms in the United States, and you have a regional map of the US as a whole. So in your Unit 1 review, we're talking about how you should look at things in terms of scale. You can look at things globally, locally, regionally. This is a regional assessment because it's just the country or nationally, right? Okay, so they've got this cool little map that's of dairy farms in the United States. All right, so does this have a stimulus? Totally, the map. So one stimulus, which is the US map, okay? And it's a US map of dairy farms. I don't know if you can hear them, but they're screaming. Well, not screaming, but yelling. So it has one stimulus, which is the US map of dairy farms. All right. You've got to be able to look at it and say, okay, it says dairy farms in the US. It's got all these like dark little dots. So clearly those dots are representative of dairy farms in the US. Okay. So this is an example of the type of thing that you may be able to see on your upcoming AP exam because it does have a stimulus. The verbs, oh my God. Okay, so since this is a really long one, what we're gonna do is we're just gonna underline the verbs on our diagram that we have here. So for the verbs for letter A, you're going to identify one type of boundary data shown on the map. So I had a couple of questions. There were some people that were asking, well, like, what the heck are these things? We're going to write them on vocabulary, or I'm actually going to put a square around important words that you need to be aware of that are vocabulary words. Okay, so identify is our first verb. Easy peasy, not hard. Letter B, identify, there it is again, the region of the United States where most dairy farms are located. All right, letter B. Letter C, identify one spatial pattern shown on the map. God, there's a lot of vocabulary in this. Goodness, I'm so glad I did. Miss Olma does fill in the blank vocabulary. All right. Letter D, describe. So describe, that's an important one, the characteristic land use associated with the spatial pattern shown on the map. Big fancy words, don't be afraid of them. All right. And letter E, describe two geographic features not shown on the map that would help explain the patterns of dairy farming shown on the map. Okay, lots of vocabulary. All right, so our vocabulary, remember, those are going to be rectangles. So identify one type of boundary data. All right, so boundary data shown on the map. What the heck does this mean? Literally, it just means the type of boundaries that you see on the map. That's all that it is. All right, identify the region of the US where most dairy farms are located. So you're going to be looking at, I have a visitor. Good night, baby bear. Yes. Yes. Good night. You see yourself? Yes. Don't poke your nose. I love you.
Can I give you a hug?
Yes. I love you.
I love you.
Good night.
Good night, mommy.
Okay. So identify the region of the US where most dairy farms are located. So you're going to say north, south, east, west, okay? You're looking at your regions. You should know what a region is or the areas, all right? Then letter C, identify one spatial pattern shown on the map. So spatial pattern, basically like the pattern of where stuff is. That's all it is, where stuff is. Were you overthinking it? I think you were. All right. And then letter D, describe the characteristic land use associated with the spatial pattern shown on the map. Well, we already said what spatial pattern is. It's the pattern where stuff is, right? Land use. You totally overthought it. Land use, all it is agriculture or urban, rural, okay? Remember we talked about rural land use patterns? Urban land use patterns. Oh my God, Miss Omega, was that easy? Yeah, it was. Don't trick yourself, okay? So, letter D, that's what we've got. Letter E, describe 2 geographic features. Ooh, geographic features. We're talking lakes, rivers, mountains, whatever. Okay, those are geographic features. So items of the landscape, like how much rain is in an area, how hot an area is, how cold an area is. Those are all geographic features. Not shown on the map. That's a biggie. All right, that will help explain the patterns of dairy farming shown on the map. It sounds like a lot. It looks like a lot. It looks like it would be scary because it's really long and it has a map, but it's super easy. All right, a lot of you that might have had problems with this totally overthought it. I can tell you that right now. All right, so part A, what the heck is the question asking? So I kept the map there for you. And here, identify one type of boundary data shown on the map. So we've already talked about what boundary data is. It's just boundaries. So it's boundary types. So you could have said state boundaries, national boundary of the lower 48 of the United States, or basically the continental US, or the boundaries of the US, right? You could have even just said the boundaries of the Great Lakes. That's it, 1 point, easy peasy. Okay, part B, identify the region of the US where most dairy farms are located. Hello, around the Great Lakes, perhaps the Midwest or the Northeast. That's all you had to do. That's it. I know you're kicking yourself, right? All right, let's keep going. Please, there we go. Letter C, what is the question asking? This one piece of hair is freaking me out. Okay, so letter C, identify one spatial pattern shown on the map. So the spatial pattern, where's stuff located, right? All right, so you've got clustering around locations within the region. So everything is kind of like all squished together in the same area is essentially what they're saying. All right, high density within a state like Wisconsin. So basically you have a lot of dairy farms in Wisconsin. You have dispersion across state or states. So maybe you see a lot of them like freckled around here or freckled around there, especially like here. You see them just kind of dispersed. Or when we say dispersed, we mean spread out, right? So spread out among states. And then the exclusion of mountainous or urban areas. So they're not going to be, and you can just logically think of this, you're not going to see humongous, smelly dairy farms in the middle of Los Angeles, in the middle of New York. You'll see them outside of LA. You'll see them outside of the area, but you're not necessarily going to see them in the middle of a big city. Okay, so the exclusion of mountainous or urban areas. Again, when it says identify one, literally any one of these things would have worked. Okay, or anything similar. Stay very close to these things though when you're looking at yours. All right. Letter D. What is this question asking? Describe the characteristic land use association. So land use with the spatial pattern shown on the map. So is it rural, agricultural, low density types of land use? Wherever there are no cities, right? That's what they were looking for. Not that hard. Okay, letter E. This is the only one you're going to notice that is worth 2 points. So letter E says describe 2, so 1 point for each, right? Geographic features not shown on the map, not shown on the map. That's a biggie. All right, that would explain the patterns of dairy farming. All right, rain. Rain is nowhere on that map. You can't see anything about the rain. You can't see anything about the temperature. It's going to make a big difference if it's redonkulously hot and you don't have enough water for your dairy animals, right? The location of rivers or lake. Speaking of access to water, the location of groundwater, again, access to water. Those are all things that you don't see on the map. And then location of land for feed crops. Where is the food coming from that's feeding these animals? The city locations, because you know that if there's a city, it's probably not going to be where the dairy farms are, right? Population density. Again, you're not going to have dairy farms in hugely populous areas. Or the location of Amish or Mennonite communities, because it's a part of their cultural landscape to have cows, to have animals that they can get dairy from. All right. So you just needed to pick 2 things. And there you go. All right. FRQ 3. So your third and last one, FRQ 3. Does this one have a stimulus? It does. It definitely does. It has the map. Again, this is actually a Robinson projection, and we know that because it has the little curves, and then it has the straight lines on the top and on the bottom, so that's a Robinson projection, just FYI. So you do have a stimulus, and again, this is an example of kind of the type of thing that you may see on your AP exam. So let's keep going. For your verbs, you have to define on letter A. Letter A, you actually have to define it. You have to define 3 things. So you have to define 3 times. You have to define each. So you have to define core periphery, distance decay, and chain migration. All right? You've got to make sure that you do all 3 of them. It's not an either or. This is where Miss Olmeda's awesome open-ended quizzes help you out. All right. This is also where your 8 million vocabulary words come into play. You're welcome. Okay. So letter A, define 3 times. Letter B is where you need to, okay, so this is where it gets a little tricky. For each part in part A, so for core periphery, for distance decay, and for chain migration, you need to select a migration stream, okay? The migration streams are the ones that are up on the top in the map. So you have from Asia to Canada. Right here is letter A, and you see that's a big thick arrow, and on the map legend, the big thick arrow is a major migration stream. So letter A, letter B from Mexico into the US is another major migration stream. Letter C from North Africa to Europe. Letter D from Asia into Western and Eastern Europe. And then letter E from Asia to Southwest Asia. Okay, those are all major migration streams. Your minor migration streams, you're going to notice, are these thinner arrows. So these thinner arrows where you have from your upper area of Latin America to Japan, where you have from, looks like South Brazil, down to Argentina and Chile, where you have, so that's F and G. You have letter H, where you have this going on in Western Africa. Then J, oh, you also have I from the northern point about Egypt into Southwest Asia. And then J is going to be from India down into, it looks like a little bit north of Indonesia and such. And then letter K from Indonesia and such down to Australia. Okay, so this is where your knowledge of your maps is going to be super important. So for each of these principles, you have to select one of those migration streams, and you have to discuss how the stream you chose, so discuss is your verb right there, they hid it from you. Discuss how the stream you chose illustrates the principle. Okay, so you have to figure out one of these little combinations of arrows. So D, perhaps, right? How does that relate to core periphery? And if you use D, that means you can't use it in distance decay or chain migration. All right, so be careful because each lettered migration stream can only be used once. So you basically got to give yourself, discuss an example for each one of these using the stimulus. So that stimulus is going to be super important. So you're going to do discuss times 3 again. Okay, and so for your vocabulary, well, this should be pretty easy. So for your vocabulary, you have in letter A, core periphery. You have distance decay. And then you also have chain migration. All right, so you have those 3 vocabulary words. And then on letter B, you're going to look at, you have all of these for letter B. In addition to those, you have to figure out the migration stream, which is easy because they've already identified them for you. You just have to pick them. Okay, so FRQ 3. All right, moving on. Part A. All right, so what the heck is the question asking? Easy. Definitions, okay? Should be your strength. So core periphery. To define core periphery, you've got to talk about the uneven spatial distribution of economic, political, or cultural power. The easiest way to do it is basically talking about how MDCs have all the power because they got all the money, and LDCs don't have any power because they're poor, okay? Or they don't get a say in global issues because they're poor. All right, that's your core periphery just in a nutshell. Okay, if you are having trouble with that, look at your definitions again. Distance decay. So distance decay is the idea that you have a decreased spatial interaction linked to increased distance. So the farther away you are from something, then the less impactful it is to you. Okay, and so that can be in distance. It can also be in terms of generations. So if you think about it, one of the examples that I gave in class was think about how well you speak Spanish as compared to, say, your grandma or your great grandma, right? That would be an example or a common example that might be able to fit a lot of us. Okay, my Spanish, obviously, as some of you may have heard, is not the greatest. Definitely not as good as my parents, definitely not as good as my grandparents were, right? And that's because of distance decay, because they're closer to the hearth or to the origination of that cultural trait than I am. All right, so you have that distance decay that is in play. Does that mean that I didn't want to speak Spanish? Definitely not. I try. I just read my kids a bilingual bedtime story. So I'm trying, but I don't use it every day, which is why I'm not necessarily as fluent. Okay, so it's that decreased influence or intensity of cultural traits and processes with an increased distance. Okay, the further away you are from somebody, that love is not going to get more impactful. It's gonna lessen, essentially. Okay, it's that type of principle. So distance decay. Chain migration. So chain migration is where you have migrants will follow earlier migrants from the same place. Okay, remember I told you guys about how I lived in Los Angeles and how I lived close to Glendale. So Glendale has the largest population of Armenian people in the world. It's even larger than Armenia in terms of the amount of Armenian people that live there. And one of the big reasons is because you initially had Armenian people that were like, hey, California, this is great. It's beautiful. It's amazing. You guys should come because there's awful war and stuff going on in our home country. And so their families were like, you know what? That sounds like a great idea. Great weather, beautiful people, beautiful place. Let's go, right? No war sounds like a plan. So you have chain migration where you know that earlier migrants have come to that same place. And something that you can identify that example. You can identify the valley in terms of Mexican Americans. That is a good thing to come to, and you can show evidence of that very easily because you have signs that are in Armenian in Glendale. You have a lot of Armenian food places in Glendale. In the valley, hello, we've got the most beautiful Mexican culture here that we are so blessed to be able to experience. And then we also have a lot of people that are bilingual. Just the other day, we were laughing because my mom was saying, normally we have el CNN uh, aprendido, and this is what we were doing before. And I was like, el CNN? What's el CNN? Oh my God, el cien, mom, I don't know what that means. Like, what, can you translate that? She was like, CNN, Jen. Oh, el CNN, like the CNN. And it was hilarious because my mom's like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm code switching. And it's like, no, that's beautiful. That's a beautiful cultural trait that we have down here. So those are things that you can see evident in the cultural landscape to show that chain migration actually has occurred. We're coming back to that. There was a point for that whole story. All right, so letter B. What's the question asking? For each principle in part A, so again, you've got to go back to the core periphery, distance decay, and chain migration. You're going to specify streams, and you can't reuse a stream. So shows migration, so the first one, core periphery, shows migration relating to core periphery principle. So you can do major migration stream B, all right, from Mexico into the United States, where you have a country that is an NIC, or a newly industrialized country that does not have the economic structure that the United States has, and people are migrating into the United States for the economic benefits, right? So there's your core periphery principle at play in, son of a biscuit eater, sorry guys. There's your core periphery principle at play in migration stream B, all right? So I've already used B, I can't use B again. All right, distance decay. So distance decay from Asia, letter A would be a really good one because you've got the cross the Pacific. So technically the nearest place to Asia would be the western coast right here. Okay, and you see a lot of influence, a lot of Asian influence in that area. So you're going to have more migrants at the edge of a country closer to the original country versus farther away. So right here, you're going to see more people that are going to be more impacted by the Asian culture than you will on this side of the country. Okay. The same, you could even apply that when you look at, let's see, if you look at letter I, right? So from Egypt into Southwest Asia, you don't have as many of those cultural principles evident within there. Okay, so those are the things that you're going to look at, your lessened cultural traits in people further away from their original country. And you can identify that saying, okay, well, this is the closest, so that's where you have the strongest, but that means that in these other areas that are further away from that migration stream, you don't necessarily have that impact of that originating culture. All right, or you could be really cool about it and you could do, like, letter E would be a really smart one to do for distance decay because you have a longer arrow, and so you have from these countries in Asia to Southwest Asia, which definitely doesn't share a lot of those same cultural principles, or you have a very distinctly different culture in Southwest Asia. So that'd be a really good example actually for distance decay. You have factors behind distance decay relationships. A lot of times the factors include money, a lack of information, a lack of connection because of that distance. Then you have chain migration. So your chain migration. So if you used, for example, if you use letter E here and you use letter B up here, then you can't use those for chain migration. So for chain migration, you can make sure that you have a link between the first migrants and those that followed. So a really good one would be, I think this is letter C right here. So from Northern Africa into Southern Europe. So you have a high prevalence of people that follow Islam, and that comes from that Northern African area. France, for example, has the largest population of Muslim people in Europe. And that's because of that migration stream that you see in letter C. All right. And so you're going to have to give an example that links those two places together to show that chain migration is evident in having happened. All right. Okay. So that is your biggie. That one was 6 points. Okay, guys. So, ta-da! FRQ 1, FRQ 2, FRQ 3. All done. Okay, so what you guys need to do is you need to be really honest. You need to go to AP Classroom and see the attached rubric for the scoring guide and the scoring form. Those are both in Google Classroom alongside the link to this video. So take those out, look at your AP Classroom and see what you answered. Score your 3 AP Classroom answers fairly. What you need to do in that scoring form is you need to explain why you did or did not get points. And I've already seen your answer, so don't fudge it. Okay? So why you did or did not get points. It's important that you understand the way that the graders look at things and the way that the graders think. That way you know what to give them. Okay? This needs to be turned in by Friday at noon, please, because I need time to grade it. So please, 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 it's only 3 FRQs. I've already gone over them with you personally in the video, and then you're going to have the scoring guide there for you while you look at your scoring form and your answers so that you can refer to. Okay? Have a fabulous day. Have a fabulous week. You're amazing, spectacular, wonderful, and I shall make another video soon. Have a great evening, guys. Thank you. Bye-bye. Okay. Did it stop?